What if the man who broke your heart was actually saving your life? What if every cold word he spoke was calculated? Every dismissal rehearsed? Every cruel smirk placed, deliberately, precisely, to make you hate him enough to leave? Julian Thorne was the ultimate cold-hearted playboy. The kind of man gossip columns loved and good women learned to avoid. Brilliant, ruthless, devastating to look at. And behind the cruelty, behind the reputation he wore like armor, was a secret so devastating it would change everything you thought you understood about him. Elise Hartley was begging for one more night. Unaware. Completely, heartbreakingly unaware. That every insult Julian hurled at her was a bullet to his own soul. That every cold look he gave her cost him more than she would ever know. While the world saw a monster, we see the hidden moments of his physical collapse. The silent tears in empty rooms. The trembling hands he steadied before she could see them. He was making her hate him today, so she wouldn't mourn him tomorrow. This is not a love story about a man who was misunderstood. It is a love story about a man who understood perfectly, completely, what he was doing, and chose to do it anyway, because he loved her that much. And that is the most devastating thing of all. Her name was Elise Hartley, 27 years old, an art curator at a private gallery in the Meridian District, the kind of woman who could spend 40 minutes in front of a painting and tell you things about it that made you see it differently forever. She was not the kind of woman who belonged in Julian Thorne's world. She knew it. Everyone knew it. She didn't have old money or a family name or the kind of effortless ease that came from growing up in rooms where every surface was expensive. She had a scholarship, a borrowed dress, and an invitation to the Alderton Foundation Gala that her gallery director had pressed into her hand and said, "Go, it's good for the gallery." She had almost said no. She had almost stayed home with a book and a cup of tea and missed the entire thing. Almost. The Alderton Gala was exactly what it looked like from the outside. Marble floors, chandeliers that cost more than her annual salary, women in gowns that moved like water, men in suits that needed no introduction. And Julian Thorne. In the center of all of it, the way he was always in the center of things. Not because he sought it. Because rooms rearranged themselves around him without being asked. Elise noticed him the way you notice weather. Before you fully decide to. She noticed the way people watched him. The way conversations shifted when he moved through them. The way he smiled at something someone said with a warmth that reached his eyes, and then, a second later, went somewhere else entirely. Somewhere behind his own face. Fast, almost invisible. She noticed that. She always noticed the things that happened in the second after. They were introduced by a mutual acquaintance who said, "Julian, this is Elise. She works in art. You'll have something to talk about," and then immediately disappeared. Julian looked at her. Directly, without the performance of charm. Just looked. "What kind of art?" he said. "The kind that makes you uncomfortable," she said. She hadn't planned to say it. It just came out. He almost smiled. "Good," he said. "I spend too much time comfortable." They talked for an hour. Away from the room, on a terrace that overlooked the city. The noise behind them and the dark ahead. He asked her questions, real ones, not small talk. About what she looked for in a painting. About the difference between beauty and meaning. About whether art could actually change anything or whether that was a comfortable lie people told themselves. She pushed back on everything he said. Calmly, precisely. Without being intimidated by who he was or what he owned. He liked that. She could see it. Not in what he said. In the way he leaned forward slightly when she disagreed. Like disagreement was rare enough to be interesting. At the end of the evening, he said, "Have dinner with me." Not a question. Not quite. But not the arrogant kind either. The kind that came from someone who genuinely wanted the answer to be yes. She should have said no. She knew his reputation. Everyone knew his reputation. She said yes. The diagnosis had come 4 months earlier, on a Tuesday morning in November, in a consultation room in a private clinic on Harrow Street. A doctor named Pemberton, who delivered bad news with the careful, practiced calm of someone who had done it many times and had never quite gotten used to it. Glioblastoma. Grade 4. Aggressive. Located in a position that made surgery high risk and incomplete. Treatment options, yes. Outcomes, uncertain, but within a statistical range that Pemberton described with numbers and Julian translated, sitting very still in that chair, into something much simpler. 12 to 18 months. Possibly less. Almost certainly not more. Julian had sat with that for a long time. Not crying. He had not cried. Not then. He had looked at the wall across from him, at a generic watercolor print in a beige frame. The kind of art that existed to fill space without demanding anything. He had thought, with a detachment that surprised him, Elise would hate that painting. And then he had stopped. Because he hadn't met Elise yet. He would meet her 6 weeks later. He would fall in love with her 8 weeks after that. He would decide, 9 weeks after that, to destroy it. He had told no one about the diagnosis. Not his business partner, Marcus. Not his housekeeper, who had worked for him for 11 years and knew more about his life than anyone. Not his sister, who lived in Edinburgh and called every Sunday and would have been on the first train down if he had said the word. No one. His reasons were his own. He was a private man. He had always been a private man. And the idea of being looked at the way people look at someone who is dying, with that particular softness that is half love and half grief, was more than he could stand. He did not want to be mourned while he was still alive. He began treatment quietly. Early mornings at the clinic. A driver who was paid exceptionally well and had signed an NDA before he understood what he was signing. A schedule that his assistant was told was a recurring client meeting. He was meticulous about the hiding. The way he was meticulous about everything. Before the decision, before he made the choice that would cost him everything, there were 3 months. 3 months of Elise. Dinner became weekends. Weekends became something neither of them named, because nomming it would require acknowledging what it was becoming. She brought him into her world the way she did everything, completely, without calculation. She took him to small galleries in unfashionable neighborhoods. Made him stand in front of paintings for longer than was comfortable. Argued with him about things that didn't matter and some things that did. Cooked terrible pasta with absolute confidence. Laughed at herself when she got things wrong. Julian had never met anyone who laughed at themselves like that. Without self-consciousness. Like vulnerability was just a fact of being alive and not something to be managed. He was different with her. He knew it. His assistant knew it. Marcus knew it and said nothing because he was wise enough to wait. Julian was lighter. Not happy exactly. Happiness had always been too simple a word for what Julian Thorne felt about anything. But present. In rooms, in conversations. In the specific, irreplaceable way of someone who has stopped waiting for what comes next and started being where they are. He had not felt that in years. Perhaps ever. But the treatment was progressing. And so was the disease. He hid it well. He was good at hiding things. But there were moments, quick ones, private ones, that the body does not ask permission for. A headache so sudden and severe that he had to grip the edge of his desk and breathe through it for 30 seconds before his assistant knocked. A moment at dinner with Elise when the room tilted slightly, and he reached for his water glass with more focus than reaching for a water glass should require. A morning in the bathroom when he looked at his own reflection and saw something in his face that hadn't been there 6 months ago. A thinning, A wearing down. Subtle enough that only someone looking for it would find it. Elise was not looking for it. She trusted what she saw. She always had. That was the thing about her that was going to destroy him. It was a Friday evening in late February. Elise had fallen asleep on his sofa. A book open on her chest. Her hair across the cushion. The lamp behind her making everything warm. Julian stood in the doorway and looked at her for a long time. He had just come from the bathroom, where he had sat on the cold floor for 11 minutes after a vertigo episode so severe he hadn't been able to stand. He had pressed his back against the cabinet and breathed, and waited for the room to stop moving, and looked at the ceiling, and thought about her, about what the next 6 months would look like, about what she would watch, if he let her stay. He thought about her face, the way it looked right now, peaceful, trusting, completely unguarded. The face of someone who had never watched anyone deteriorate, who had never had to measure someone's life in clinic appointments and symptom progressions and conversations with doctors who chose their words with increasing care. He thought about what love looked like at the end of something like this, and he made a decision. She would not watch him die. He would not allow it. Not her. Not this woman who opened herself to everything without armor. Not this woman who had walked into his carefully constructed life and made it feel, briefly, like it was worth the living. He would give her something better than a front row seat to his ending. He would give her a reason to go. He would make himself into something she couldn't love, something she would be relieved to leave. He would break her heart cleanly, so grief couldn't break it slowly. He stood in the doorway and looked at her sleeping face, and felt something move through him that had no name. Too large for a word, too quiet for a sound. Then he walked to the sofa, tucked the blanket over her, pressed his lips briefly to her hair. She didn't wake. She never knew. It started slowly, enough that she didn't recognize it as a pattern. Just thought he was having difficult weeks. That work was heavy. That something was off. He canceled plans. First once, then twice. With excuses that were plausible but thin. He was distracted in conversations. Present in body, absent in the ways that mattered. And then the words started. Small ones at first. The kind that could be explained away. Stress, tiredness, a bad day. But they weren't any of those things. They were deliberate, calibrated, each one placed exactly where it would do the most damage. You're too much sometimes, Elise. Said over dinner, flatly, without apology. She had blinked. Too much how, she said. Just too much, he said, and looked at his phone. In private, always in private, he came apart. After she left that evening, he sat in the kitchen for a long time. His hands on the table. Completely still. The way a person is still, when stillness is the only thing between them, and something they cannot afford to feel. You're too much sometimes, Elise. He pressed his thumb hard into his palm. Hard enough to hurt. He needed to feel something clean. Something that was just pain without complication. She was not too much. She was exactly enough. She was precisely, perfectly, heartbreakingly enough. And he had looked her in the face and said otherwise. He got up and went to the window. The city below, all those lights. All those people going home to things that were intact. The first tear came without warning. He didn't stop it. There was no one to see. She told herself stories. That was the thing about Elise. She was generous with the people she loved. Sometimes too generous. She told herself he was stressed. She told herself it was temporary. She told herself that the man who had stood on that terrace at the Alderton Gala and asked her what she looked for in a painting was still in there. She had seen him. She knew he was real. She held on to that. Long past the point when holding on to it was wise. She tried. Of course she tried. She was Elise Hartley. She did not give up on people easily. She asked him what was wrong. He said nothing. She asked if she had done something. He said no. She asked him, once, quietly, with her whole heart in the question, if he still wanted her there. He looked at her. For a moment, just one, just a fraction, she saw it. Something raw and terrible, and completely at odds with everything he had been saying. Something that looked like love and grief, braided together, so tightly they were indistinguishable. And then it was gone. "I don't know what you want me to say, Elise," he said. Coolly, cleanly, not unkindly enough to be cruel. Exactly as unkind as he needed to be. She went home that night and cried for 2 hours. Not because she was weak. Because she had loved him fully. And loving fully means breaking fully. There is no partial version. Meanwhile, Julian sat in a clinic chair at 7 in the morning, while a nurse adjusted his IV. The room was quiet. White walls, thin light. The specific stillness of medical spaces. The nurse, a woman named Patricia who had been at the clinic for 18 years and had learned to read the people in her chairs the way some people read weather, looked at him carefully. "Are you all right?" she said. "Fine," he said. She didn't believe him. She never believed him when he said fine. But she had learned not to push. She had also noticed that in recent weeks he had stopped wearing the watch. A woman's watch, small, silver, that he used to keep in his jacket pocket. And take out sometimes, when he thought no one was watching. And just hold. She wondered about that. She said nothing. It was a Thursday. Elise had come to his penthouse without calling first. She never did that. It was not the kind of thing she did. But she had reached the end of stories she could tell herself. She had stood outside the building for 10 minutes, deciding whether to go in. And then she had gone in. Because she needed to look at him. Because she needed to know if what she had seen, that single unguarded moment, had been real. He opened the door. He looked at her. And she saw it again. The fraction of a second before the mask came down. Something enormous and desperate and completely controlled. "Elise," he said, flat warning. "Please," she said, "can I just come in?" He let her in. He always let her in. That was his first mistake of the evening. She stood in his kitchen. The same kitchen where he had sat with his hands on the table after saying "you're too much." The same kitchen where he had gone to the window and let the first tear come. She looked at him. Directly. Without flinching. "Please don't break my heart," she said. Quietly. Not dramatically. The way a person speaks when they have run out of everything except the truth. "Julian, whatever this is, whatever is happening, please just tell me. I can handle it. I promise you I can handle anything except losing you to silence." He looked at her for a long time. Every part of him wanted to tell her. He felt it physically. The way you feel the pull of gravity before you decide whether to fall. And then he thought about what telling her meant. What it looked like. What it cost. He thought about her face 6 months from now. In a hospital room. Holding his hand. Learning what grief looked like from the inside. Her, Elise, who trusted everything, who opened to everything, learning that some things end in rooms that smell of antiseptic and quiet. He could not do that to her. He would not. "You want to know what's happening," he said. His voice even, careful. "This is happening. I don't want what you want, Elise. I never did. I thought I did. I was wrong." The air left the room. She stared at him. "That's not true," she said. "It is," he said. "I've seen you, Julian. I've seen your face when you look at me. I know what that looks like." He held her gaze. The hardest thing he had ever done. Harder than the diagnosis. Harder than the treatment. Harder than any single moment in 35 years of a life that had not been easy. "You're seeing what you want to see," he said. You always do. It's a beautiful quality, Elise, but not everything is what you want it to be. He watched it land. Watched her face do the thing faces do when something they believed in becomes uncertain. It was the most painful thing he had ever watched. And he had made it happen. On purpose. Because he loved her. She left without crying. She held it until she was in the lift. He heard nothing. The door was closed. He went to the window. He watched the street below. He waited until he saw her emerge from the building. Walking fast. Head down. Not looking back. Good, he thought. Don't look back. Don't make it harder than it already is. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass. And the tears came. Not one or two. The kind that don't stop once they start. The kind that have been held too long. He stayed at that window for a very long time. She did not come back. 2 weeks. Then 3. She did what she had told herself she would do. She let it be over. But she could not stop thinking. The mind is not tidy. It does not accept instructions. It goes where it needs to go. And Elise's mind kept going back. Over every conversation. Every moment. Every small thing she had noticed and set aside. The way he had reached for the water glass at dinner. Both hands, careful. The kind of careful that is not natural. The kind that is compensating for something. The morning she had arrived early, and he hadn't heard her come in. And she had found him at the kitchen counter, with his hand pressed flat against the surface. Eyes closed. Breathing through something. He had straightened when he heard her, and said he'd slept badly. She had believed him. The weight he had lost. She had noticed it. She had told herself it was stress. Work pressure. She had cooked for him more. She had not asked directly. The appointment card. She had seen it once on his desk. A clinic she didn't recognize. She had not looked closely. She had turned away because it felt private. She was sitting in her flat. Alone. 3 weeks after the last night in his kitchen. And she was assembling these pieces. One by one. With the sick, rising certainty of someone who already knows the answer, but hasn't said it yet. And then, quietly, she said it. To the empty room. To herself. To whatever was listening. He's ill. She called Marcus. Julian's business partner. The man who had known Julian for 15 years and watched the last few months with the careful silence of someone who suspected something he couldn't prove. Is he sick? She said. No preamble, no apology. A silence on the line. Too long to mean nothing. Elise, Marcus started. Marcus, she said, please. Another silence. I don't know the details, Marcus said carefully. He hasn't told me, but there have been mornings, he stopped. I've covered for things I didn't fully understand. I've had questions I didn't ask because he would have shut me out entirely if I had. How long? She said. I think at least since November, Marcus said. Maybe before. November. A month before she met him. The timeline arranged itself in her mind. Perfectly. Horribly. He had known when he met her. He had known when he asked her to dinner. He had known through every good month. Through every evening on the terrace. Through every conversation that had felt like the beginning of something. He had always known. And he had chosen her anyway. And then chosen to let her go. For the same reason. She sat very still. For a long time. In the flat that suddenly felt different. Like the walls had shifted slightly. Like everything she had understood about the last 6 months had just been rewritten. He was not a monster. He was a man who was dying. And who had decided that loving her meant protecting her. Even from himself. She thought about the words. Every one of them. You're too much. I don't want what you want. You're seeing what you want to see. Bullets to his own soul. Every single one. She put on her coat. He opened the door, and she saw it properly for the first time. Without the mask. He hadn't had time to put it on. She had come without warning. Again. He looked thinner. Tired in a way that sleep didn't explain. There were shadows under his eyes that were not new, but that she was seeing differently now. With the right frame. His face, when he saw her before he controlled it, was everything. Relief. Panic. Love so enormous, and so helpless it was almost painful to look at. Gone in a second. Replaced by the careful neutral she had come to hate. "Elise," he started. "Don't," she said. She walked past him into the flat. She stood in the middle of the room. She turned around. "Glioblastoma," she said. The word landed like a stone in still water. She watched the ripple move across his face. He went very still. "How?" he started. "It doesn't matter how," she said, her voice steady. "What matters is that you knew, from the beginning, and you let me fall in love with you anyway, and then you tried to make me hate you so I would leave before I had to watch." Her voice broke. "Just once." She steadied it. "Before I had to watch you die," she said. He sat down. On the sofa. The way a person sits when the standing becomes too much. He didn't deny it. He had known, somewhere, that this was coming. That she was too intelligent and too attentive for the story to hold forever. "I was protecting you," he said. "I know," she said, "and it was the most arrogant thing you have ever done." He looked up. "You decided what I could handle," she said. "Without asking me. You took the choice away from me, the choice to know, the choice to stay, the choice to love you through whatever comes, and you made it for me, because you thought you knew best." "I was trying to save you from grief," he said. "Julian," she crossed the room. She sat down beside him, not touching, just near. "You cannot save someone from grief by becoming the reason for it. I was always going to grieve you, whether you let me in or not. The only difference is whether I got to be with you while you were still here." He pressed his hands together. He looked at them, his jaw tight. "I didn't want you to watch me disappear," he said, barely above a whisper. "I know," she said. "I didn't want to be someone you had to take care of," he said. "I know," she said. "I didn't want the last thing you saw when you looked at me to be." "Julian." He stopped. She reached over. She put her hand over his. "Look at me," she said. He looked up. His eyes were bright. Completely, helplessly bright. "The last thing I see when I look at you," she said quietly, "is the man who tried to destroy his own happiness to protect mine, who sat at a clinic chair every week in silence rather than ask for help, who said terrible things he didn't mean to a woman he loved so she would be free." She held his gaze. "That is not a man I'm walking away from," she said. "Not now, not when you need someone, and not," her voice caught, "not when there is still time." He broke then. Finally. Completely. The way things break, when they have been held together, past their limit. She held him. Both arms. She didn't say anything. She just held on. And for the first time since November, since that consultation room and that watercolor in the beige frame, Julian Thorne let someone hold him. And did not try to be all right. She stayed. Not out of pity. She was precise about that distinction. With herself and with him. "I'm not here because I feel sorry for you," she said one morning over coffee. "I know," he said. "I'm here because I choose to be, because this is where I want to be, and I need you to let that be enough." He looked at her. "It's more than enough," he said. He told his sister. Finally. She came down from Edinburgh on the first train and did not stop crying for the first hour, and then dried her eyes and said, "Right. What do you need?" She was extraordinary. Julian had always known she was extraordinary. He had just been too proud to let her be extraordinary on his behalf. He told Marcus. who sat across from him in the office and listened without speaking, and then said, "I've been covering for the wrong things. Tell me what you actually need, and I'll make it happen." The people who loved him showed up. Because that is what people do when you finally let them. The treatment continued. Some weeks were better. Some were not. There were mornings Elise drove him to the clinic at 7 and sat in the waiting room with a book she didn't read. There were afternoons when the headaches were bad enough that the flat was quiet, and she worked beside him in the same room, not hovering, just present. There were evenings that were completely ordinary. Dinner, television, an argument about something small. The specific, irreplaceable ordinary of two people sharing a life. Julian had not expected ordinary. It was the thing he had been most afraid of losing. And it was the thing she gave him back. One evening, a quiet one, early spring, the city audible below, he looked at her across the room. She was on the sofa with her feet tucked under her. A catalog open on her lap. Completely absorbed. "I'm sorry," he said. She looked up. "For which part?" she said, not unkindly. "All of it," he said. "For deciding for you, for the things I said, for the weeks I let you believe I didn't want you." She looked at him for a moment. "You were trying to love me the only way you knew how," she said. "It was the wrong way," he said. "Yes," she said, "but I know why, and knowing why doesn't excuse it, but it makes it possible to put down." "Can you," he said, "put it down?" She thought about it honestly. The way she did everything. "I already have," she said. The prognosis shifted. Not dramatically. Not the way it happens in stories where love alone is the cure. But measurably. Incrementally. In the way that happens sometimes when a treatment finds its footing and a body decides to keep fighting. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Julian had learned to distrust optimism. Elise had not. She held enough of it for both of them. He was not cured. That word was not in use. What was in use? Stable, responding time. More time. Not infinite. Nothing is infinite. But more than November's numbers had suggested. More than the watercolor in the beige frame. More than the decision he had made standing in a doorway watching her sleep. Enough time. For now. And now was enough. Elise curated a small exhibition that autumn. Works by artists who had made things in the face of uncertainty. Paintings and prints, and one extraordinary series of photographs about time and the body. Julian came to the opening. He stood in front of the photographs for a long time. She came to stand beside him. Neither of them spoke. Then he said, "Is this about me?" "It's about everyone," she said. "But also a bit about you," he said. "A bit," she admitted. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him. In the room full of people and art, and the particular charged air of something that mattered. He pressed his lips to her hair. She felt it. The way she always felt it. Like something settled. Like the room found its center. He had tried to break her heart so she wouldn't have to watch his break. He had been wrong. She had told him so. He had accepted it. And the accepting had cost him every wall he had built in 35 years. But here is what remained after the walls came down. Her. Him. A room full of art. A sister who called every other day. A business partner who had started asking the real questions. A nurse named Patricia who had noticed the watch. And more time than November had promised. Love does not look like a grand gesture. Not always. Sometimes it looks like showing up at a door without calling first. Sometimes it looks like sitting in a waiting room with a book you don't read. Sometimes it looks like two people on a sofa arguing about something small. Sometimes it looks like a man who tried to disappear. And a woman who refused to let him. "Please don't break my heart," she had said. And he had. In every way he knew how. Because he loved her that much. And love, when it is real, finds a way back. Even from the places it was never supposed to return from.